It all began on a night when the sky seemed to hold its breath, when the world felt suspended between silence and storm. The mountains were dark silhouettes against a pale, ghostly moon, and the wind howled through the trees as if warning someone of what was about to happen. Anna clutched her husband Daniel's hand, her heart pounding, though she told herself it was only from the climb, only from the sharp edge of the cliff where they stood. She had no idea that the man she had loved for 10 years, the man she had once believed was her safe place, was about to commit the unthinkable. Daniel's eyes were hard, unreadable, and when he turned to her with a smile, there was no warmth in it, only calculation. She opened her mouth to ask him why they had come up here so late, why the urgency, why the strange silence he carried all evening. But before the words could escape her lips, before she could gather the courage to confront the gnawing suspicion in her chest, Daniel's hands pressed firmly against her shoulders. The last thing she remembered was the shocking betrayal in that moment, the disbelief that this was truly happening, as he shoved her forward, hard, into the abyss. The fall was brutal, and the world blurred into fragments of rock, wind, and bone-breaking impact. Darkness swallowed her before she could even scream. Daniel peered over the edge, his chest rising and falling with shallow, rapid breaths. For a moment he stood there, trembling, as though stunned by what he had done. But then his expression hardened. He had planned this for months, and now it was done. He whispered to himself, "It's over." He walked away from the cliff as if erasing footprints with every step, convincing himself that with Anna gone, the problems, the debts, the suffocating weight of their marriage, all of it had vanished with her. What he didn't know was that Anna's story was far from over. Anna woke in agony. Pain pulsed through every part of her body, but the air in her lungs shocked her awake. She couldn't move at first. She could barely breathe. It was as though the earth itself had decided to cradle her broken form at the base of the cliff, sparing her life when it should have taken it. Time blurred. She didn't know how long she lay there, drifting in and out of consciousness, until she felt the cool splash of water on her face. A villager, an old shepherd from a nearby hamlet, had found her, still alive, still fighting. He called for help, and slowly, painstakingly, Anna's life was pulled back from the edge of death. Her recovery was long and grueling. Bones had been shattered, ribs cracked, and her body was littered with scars that no mirror could hide. But the deeper wound, the one no surgeon could heal, was the betrayal. Night after night in the small wooden house of the shepherd who cared for her, Anna replayed the moment in her mind. The shove, the coldness in Daniel's eyes. The man who had promised her forever had tried to end her story. And yet, she had survived. At first, her survival felt like a curse. She felt ruined, broken, discarded. But over time, as her body strengthened, something fierce began to burn inside her. She realized she had been given something few people ever had. A second chance, a chance to reclaim her life and decide who she would become. She promised herself she would not be a victim, not anymore. She would heal, she would rebuild, and one day, she would face Daniel again. Not as the broken wife he tried to bury, but as the woman who refused to die. Meanwhile, Daniel returned to the city and crafted his story. He wept to neighbors, telling them that Anna had slipped while they were hiking, that he had tried to save her but couldn't. He played the grieving widower so convincingly that even his closest friends comforted him. Soon, sympathy poured in. People brought food, sent cards, gave him the compassion he had never deserved. He even began to enjoy the freedom. No more wife questioning his late nights, no more arguments about money, no more reminders of his failures. He spent her life insurance money recklessly, indulging in luxuries he once could never afford. He smiled at parties, drank to his freedom, and convinced himself that life had finally given him what he deserved. But Daniel underestimated two things, guilt and fate. Though he tried to bury it, guilt would creep in during the quietest moments. Sometimes he swore he could hear Anna's voice in the silence of the house. Sometimes he dreamed of her eyes staring at him from the cliff, eyes filled with disbelief and betrayal. He told himself it was nothing, just his mind playing tricks, but deep inside, he knew the truth. You cannot murder love without it haunting you. And fate had decided Daniel's punishment would not come in the form of bars or handcuffs, but in the form of the woman he thought he had buried. 2 years after the fall, Anna stood on her own again. The scars remained, reminders of the night her life was torn apart, but she carried them with pride. They were no longer marks of suffering, but marks of survival. She had built a new strength, a new willpower, and though the memories still clawed at her heart, she was ready. She returned to the city quietly, not announcing herself, not rushing to confront him. Instead, she watched. She found Daniel easily, He hadn't changed much, except perhaps more arrogant, more careless. He had a new woman on his arm, a younger one, who seemed blinded by his charm the way Anna once had been. It sickened her, but she didn't rush to act. She needed to be smart. She needed him to see her when the time was right. The first time Daniel saw her was like a ghost story brought to life. He was walking down a crowded street when he froze, his eyes locking on her across the way. She didn't hide. She stood tall, scars visible, eyes burning into his like flames. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, convinced he was hallucinating. But when he opened them again, she was still there, very much alive. His face drained of color. For the first time in years, Daniel knew fear. What followed was not just a confrontation of husband and wife, but of betrayal and truth. Daniel tried to deny it, tried to convince her that he had panicked, that it had been an accident, but Anna only shook her head. She had seen his eyes, felt his shove, lived the consequences. There was no accident, only intent. Their battle was not only personal but legal. Anna brought the truth forward. At first, no one believed her. It had been too long, and Daniel's lies had roots. But Anna's survival, her scars, her testimony, and the evidence of his recklessness and debts painted a picture no one could ignore. Slowly, his facade crumbled. Friends who once pitied him began to whisper. The woman he now courted left him when she saw the monster behind the mask. And finally, justice came. Daniel was arrested, his crime laid bare, his life of indulgence stripped away. He sat in a cell, a man haunted by the ghost he had created, the ghost that came back not for revenge but for truth. Anna stood outside the courthouse on the day of his sentencing, breathing in the crisp air. Reporters crowded around, asking her questions, calling her a miracle, a survivor. She spoke not with bitterness but with strength. I was pushed down, she told them, but I rose again. Not because of hatred, but because life gave me another chance. And I will live it, fully. Her words rippled far beyond the courthouse steps. People who heard her story found courage in their own battles. Women, trapped in abusive relationships, saw a mirror in her scars and found the bravery to walk away. Men and women struggling with betrayal, with loss, with pain, realized that survival was not just about breathing, it was about choosing to rise again. Anna's life did not return to what it once was. It became something greater. She traveled. She spoke to groups about resilience. She helped those who had been silenced find their voices. She discovered that the tragedy meant to end her life had instead ignited a fire in her, one that would burn brightly for others to see. And sometimes, when she stood on a mountaintop again, staring at the vast horizon, she thought of that night. She thought of the hands that shoved her, the betrayal that nearly ended her story. And then she smiled. Not because of what she had lost, but because of what she had gained. She had learned the most important truth of all, that survival is not the absence of pain, but the decision to rise again, stronger, fiercer, unbreakable. Daniel thought he had gotten away. He thought death would silence her forever. But Anna came back. Not just to confront him, but to reclaim her life, to remind the world that even in the deepest betrayal, the human spirit has the power to rise, to fight, and to shine. And that is the story of Anna, the woman who was pushed off a cliff, who came back from death itself, and who chose to live not as a victim, but as a survivor, a fighter, a beacon of hope.